Hi, I'm Peter Giles, a Jesuit priest and director of A Faith That Does Justice. I'd like to speak for a moment this morning about our readings for this Sunday, which is Easter Sunday. Easter challenges us to live the joy and the peace of the risen Christ. In raising Jesus from the dead, God's love overcame human hatred, and God's desire for life in its fullness demonstrated that death does not have a last word. And as disciples of Jesus today, we're called as his original disciples to really remember that we are beloved sinners who have been forgiven, and we are missioned to really live the Easter joy, the Easter faith in this world among all God's people. Our readings speak to this. In our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, Peter speaks to people who did not know the historical Jesus. He tells them he was a man anointed by God, he was empowered by the Spirit, and that he went about doing good. And yet human sinfulness arose to kill him, crucify him on a cross. And what he describes is that God said, "No, I will raise him from the dead because of how he had lived." Jesus taught us what it means to be a human being in our fullness. And as the risen Christ, he asks us to participate at a deep level of his divinity by finishing or continuing the work of the kingdom of God that he began so many years ago. And so, in our gospel reading then, we hear somewhat more of the same, but in a different way. Mary Magdalene approaches the tomb on Easter Sunday only to find it empty. She runs and tells Peter and John what has happened. They come, they see, and they eventually leave very confused, not understanding what has yet happened. The gospel writer's intent is really to show us that belief in the resurrection took a little bit of time. It wasn't instantaneous. That there was tremendous desolation after Jesus' death. His disciples had thought they had come upon a temporal king who would really overthrow the Roman Empire, bring peace to all of Israel. And that is not what they got. They got a man of humble service on behalf of all God's people, who God has now raised from the dead. But what happens with time, with the appearance stories that we'll read in subsequent weeks during the Easter season, the disciples come to realize that Jesus has been raised from the dead and he now lives forever in all his glory. And he calls us to continue the work that he once began. And so today, we are those disciples living in our time and really being asked to fulfill Jesus' utopic dream that is also historic as it acts against human sinfulness so that all God's people might participate in a fair share of the goods of God's creation. The poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized show us what this means, for it is in their own lives of suffering that we see Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection really play out before us today. It is in their own suffering that we see Jesus' redemptive call to human history. And in their joy of the poor, we see really that we are beloved sinners who have been really called in mission to continue the work that Jesus began of creating and incarnating God's love in this world. And so today, as we approach and get ready for our Easter Sunday celebrations, let us keep in mind that we do have a call. We have a call to really move beyond Jesus' death, resurrection, and to live as resurrection people in this world, incarnating his love, his compassion, and his justice for all God's people. And in doing so, let us remember that any suffering we incur along the way, we can trust that the God who raised Jesus from the dead will do no less for us if we remain faithful to his call, because our Easter faith tells us that God's love and God's desire for life in its fullness overcome hatred and overcome death. That is our belief, and that is what we are called to live out and incarnate in this world. So thank you very much. That's food for thought. I want to wish everybody a blessed holiday season, a blessed Easter, and let us continue to walk with Jesus in this world, doing the work that he has asked us to do. So thank you. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.